Hi everyone, I'm Chyill and welcome back to another detailed champion guide. Today I'll finally be updating my guide on Croak, the Random Assassin. For this Croak guide, I've gotten help from my good friend Tunni, who is known for his Grand Champion Croak plays, which he streams on his Twitch channel, TwoKnee, to write most of this guide, and so please sit back, relax and enjoy the show. Croak is an aggressive melee champion who excels in getting in, deal some decent burst damage with his dual blades and then get out. While Croak seems like he's a pretty straightforward champion to learn to play, it takes quite a bit of practice to master Croak, and so I would say Croak is not a beginner friendly champion. As I was saying, in terms of damage, Croak can dish out a decent amount of damage usually, but when he invests some energy and the enemy doesn't have any escapes, Croak can actually dish out a huge amount of damage. To fulfill his job as an assassin, Croak has some decent sustain and control, and he has exceptional movement abilities built into his base kit. It sounds like Croak is really strong because of all this, but in reality, Croak can have some troubles with people dodging his abilities easily at higher levels, and melees also having a much easier time avoiding Croak's abilities due to some limitations to his movement abilities. So yeah, that was just a brief summary of Croak as a champion. Now I'll just quickly give a rundown on how this video is structured before I get into the meat of the guide. As with my older champion guides, I've split this guide up into 5 sections, and that is abilities, playstyle, Battlerites, Loadouts and team comps. I've included timestamps directly to each section in the description below, so feel free to jump directly to a certain section that you need if you wish. I'd like to point out that I do not have a gameplay tip section in my champion guides anymore, since I feel like some of the tips are quite repetitive from champion to champion, and so these little gameplay tips will instead pop up in the video when they are relevant, I suppose. And so yeah, with all that being said, let's begin. First off, abilities. Croak's Mouse 1 ability is Blade Flurry, and this is his basic melee attack. What it does is Croak will attack the target in front of him for 8 damage per hit, and his first 4 Mouse 1 hits has increased attack speed. After that 4 initial hits, his attack speed will decrease tremendously until the attack charges recharge over time or are refreshed by other abilities, which we'll get to soon. Moving on, Croak's Mouse 2 ability is Toxic Mug, and this is one of Croak's main sustain ability. What it does is Croak will spit some toxin into the air before it lands onto a targeted area. This toxin heals Croak for 6 health per target hit, and it also deals 6 damage to all enemies while inflicting the toxin debuff onto them. This toxin debuff can deal 8 damage to the target and heal yourself for 8 health over 5 seconds, and so it is extremely useful if you can apply it consistently onto opponents whenever it is up. This way you can maximize the amount of self-healing that you get as well as the damage that you output. Next up, Croak's spacebar ability is called Frog Leap, and this is Croak's main movement ability. What it does is Croak will leap towards the sky, and when he lands, he strikes an enemy in front of him with his twin blades. For 1.8 seconds after the first jump, Croak has the option to recast spacebar and leap into the sky again. The target that is hit by Frog Leap will be dealt 20 damage, making it a very good way to engage onto an enemy before you follow up with a couple of Mouse 1 hits, since the jump also refreshes your attack charges, making you attack faster again for 4 attacks. After this few Mouse 1 hits, you can either reposition to leap toward the enemy a second time for more damage, or use the second leap to get out if you feel the situation will turn bad soon. This ability alone gives Croak the ability to jump in and jump out to deal a fair amount of damage if you are able to land the first jump, and is pretty much his bread and butter ability, I suppose. After using your first spacebar, if you feel there is no need to use the recast to get out of the area, and you don't use your recast, then the cooldown of your Frog Leap would be at 8.2 seconds instead of the usual 10 seconds. Croak's Frog Leap is a very versatile ability, as there are multiple ways you can use it. You can use it to engage onto a single opponent and then disengage. You can use it on opponent A and then opponent B to maximize the damage that you output, or you can also use it on opponent A, create space between the both of you by walking backwards and then jumping onto them again to maximize damage on a single opponent. This may seem like an over-aggressive approach, but due to one of Croak's abilities, Noxious Lunge, which we will get into below, he should still be able to get out without taking in too much damage. Furthermore, you can even use your first leap to reposition yourself before using your recast to hit the opponent if you're desperate. Moving on, Croak's Q ability is Camouflage, and this is invisibility and control ability. What it does is Croak will become invisible, removing any negative effects such as Lucy's Deadly Injection or Odor's Stone Glass, to give some examples, and it also gives a fading haze of 30% that fades over 1.5 seconds. Not only that, your next Mouse 1 strike while invisible also stuns the target for 1 second and inflict 8 damage to the target. This means that Croak can stun the target, and while they are stunned, squeeze in 2 Mouse 1s before following up with Noxious Lunge to maximize the damage and get him into a good position. Once again, we'll go into Noxious Lunge soon if you haven't played Croak before. Using Camouflage refreshes your weapon charges as well, and so you don't have to worry about not having weapon charges ready after stunning a target. Another good thing about Camouflage is that it is also a good ability to use to bait your enemy's counter, since the eye icon above the enemy will tell them if you are close to them or not. Being close to them and threatening to stun them is usually a good way to force them to use their counters or escape abilities. Next up, Croak's E ability is Noxious Lunge, and as you can guess, it is another one of his mobility abilities. What it does is Croak will dash forward at high speeds while piercing through enemies, dealing 12 damage to all targets pierced by the dash. This ability is really good for engaging or disengaging if you initially engaged onto an enemy with your frog leap. Just be careful that you're not invulnerable while dashing, and so damage and stuns can still affect you while you're dashing, and you may be interrupted if you get stunned or CC'd in any way. When it comes to AWP control, you can also use this ability to steal the AWP, as it is a pretty quick ability, but of course you have to be a bit careful with it and have great timing with it, since the damage Noxious Lunge does is pretty low. And so yeah, those were Croak's abilities that doesn't require energy. Now let us move on to those which do. First off, Croak's R ability is Toxin Blades, and this is Croak's main dueling or trading ability. What it does is that Croak will coat his blades in Toxin, increasing his blade flurry or mouse 1 attack damage by 2, a lifesteal of 2 health per hit, and it also applies the Toxin debuff onto the target when you hit someone with your mouse 1 ability. This ability is best used when the enemy does not have any iframes left, as they can't avoid your blows. When you're needing to deal with another melee champion that is smashing your face in, this ability also helps to increase Croak's dueling potential, allowing him to trade better against other melee champions. Personally, this is one of the skills that I use a lot in games, especially if you use it with Frog Frenzy, which is a Battlerites that we'll get into in a later section. Moving on, Croak's first EX ability is a shift right click ability, Sludge Spit. What it does for 25 energy is Croak will spit a projectile in the targeted direction, dealing 10 damage and applying the blind and toxin debuffs to the target that it hits. Because Sludge Spit costs energy to use, the ability is a high risk, high reward ability since its hitbox is quite small. That said though, if you do hit with a spit, the blind effect reduces the vision or sight range by 80%, which is incredibly powerful in most situations. With the enemy blinded by the spit, you can easily frog leap onto them for damage, and they would not have much time to react. They would also tend to panic more since they cannot see very far for a while. A little trick you can do is you can blind an enemy and proceed to get the AWP freely, but watch out since they can still hear you attacking the AWP even if they are blinded. Another good use for the ability is to finish enemies off as well. Since it is a direct projectile attack, I usually use this to finish targets that are low but are really far away from me. If you're really desperate, you can even use this ability to try to steal the AWP if you wanted to, but I generally would not take the risk as it does cost 25 energy, and since it only does 10 damage, your chances of stealing the AWP this way is typically quite low. Next up, Croak's second EX ability is his Shift Q ability, Deceit, and this is another one of his main sustain ability. What it does for 25 energy is Croak will become invisible, removing any debuffs, and you also gain a fading haste of 30% over 1.5 seconds. This is very similar to Croak's normal Q ability, but it only lasts for 2.5 seconds. Moreover, the next mouse 1 strike, while invisible, is not a stun, but it is a 3-second incapacitate instead. After Croak lands this incapacitate, Croak will re-enter camouflage and can further stun the enemy if he wishes to. Deceit is a really good ability to use when you're trying to set up a combo for your team. For example, you can set up Jade Snipe or Ashka's area of effect stun, and with the camouflage you gain after incapping an enemy, you can even follow up after all that with a stun and a couple more hits. It is good to note that Deceit can also be used on orbs to prolong your stealth duration, making it last for 5.5 seconds, and so that could be useful when you're trying to stun someone far away. Another thing to be careful of as well is that you will not re-enter the second camouflage if you use your attack too late, and Croak is no longer invisible when he connects the attack. If you're not sure what the incapacitated debuff is, it is like a long stun, but it breaks if the incap target is dealt any damage or the debuff duration itself expires. In 1v1 situations, this Shift Q ability is very good because it allows you to incapacitate the enemy to buy you some time and get those small health or energy orbs or even the central orb for you. A nice little trick you can do when the central orb is up is that you can use Deceit to go close to an enemy, bait out their abilities such as counters, and then hit the middle orb to re-enter camouflage before actually trying to stun the enemy. These moves will usually let you outlast your enemy defensive abilities, and you should be able to get a stun off this way. Finally, Croak's ultimate ability on the F key is Venom Wind, and what it does after a medium cast time is that Croak will do a dash forward while releasing a venomous wind and piercing through enemies to inflict the Venom debuff. Venom does 18 damage over 2 seconds, and when the effect ends, it will deal another 38 damage to the target and nearby enemies as well. The Venom's explosion can be stacked, and that means 2 people with the Venom debuff can actually cause a total of 76 damage to both targets if they are close to each other when the debuff expires. In most situations though, enemies won't stack up, and so this means that the ultimate ability can do 18 plus 38 damage, and that is a total of 56 damage. While dashing forward, Croak is immune to damage, and so in desperate situations, Venom Wind can be used as an iframe as a last resort. For example, if the enemy's Croak uses Venom Wind on you and you do not have your spacebar, you should be able to avoid damage with your own ultimate if you time it right, and perhaps inflict the Venom debuff on the opposing Croak instead. To get the best effect, you usually want to use it when the opponent has no iframes left, or else they can easily dodge the 38 damage nuke with their iframe ability. However, even if the enemy has the iframe abilities ready, if you are quick enough, you can actually use Venom Wind and then attempt to stun them with your Camouflage or Q ability, and this should ensure the damage lands on the enemy whether they have their iframe ability ready or not. I will usually try to do this when the targets are at the end of my Venom Wind dash, since I should be close enough to stun them with Camouflage, especially if I instantly activate Camouflage immediately after the dash. The ultimate ability, in my opinion, is really great if you can pull it off, so definitely try to set it up when you have enough energy to use the ultimate ability. And so yeah, that's about it for Croak's abilities. Let us now move on and talk a little bit about his playstyle. Croak's playstyle can vary depending on who you are facing against, but typically his playstyle will tend to be more aggressive than passive. Croak is an opportunist, and that means the moment he sees a chance, he will jump in and apply pressure to the backline, do as much damage as he can, and then get out. Most importantly, it is to deal some true damage and not soak too much damage. If you're unfamiliar with what it means to deal true damage, what it means is that you'll try to deal more than 40 damage to the enemy before they are able to heal themselves up with abilities. So typically, the game plan you'll be trying to adopt would be to jump into an enemy, deal that 20 damage, attack a couple of times with your mouse 1, and then decide if you want to attack more or back off. If you want to attack more, you could either back off a little bit to get the second jump off, or maybe even stun them and hit them a couple of times instead. It will likely depend on the exact situation. Once you're done dealing damage, use E to damage the target and disengage at the same time. While waiting for a chance to jump in with your spacebar ability, you'll typically be trying to use your mouse 2 to poke a little bit here and there, so it is sort of your filler ability. When trying to engage onto an enemy, you'll typically be trying to start with your spacebar ability, since hitting Croak's spacebar onto the enemy deals a decent amount of damage. Alternatively, you can start by staying on your mount, use the sprint ability to close the gap as much as possible, before using spacebar to engage. I suppose you can also use your Q ability to engage, but personally I prefer not to do this, since it is one of Croak's key abilities. When you're up against other melee champions, Croak is usually at the disadvantage, so you usually want to do short trades and then get out. When you jump in, if you ever feel like the trade is not worth it, just jump out of there, especially in games where you don't have a healer. Personally, if I don't hit my first spacebar, I usually back out of there immediately since I already missed 20 damage. If you need healing, and if you ever feel the need to play passively, you can use your mouse 2 spit to heal up and poke. When you use your camouflage, sometimes it's good to hold it against people with counters, to wait for them to use their counter and switch up your patterns every so often to keep it unpredictable. When it comes to trading hits, Croak should be able to duel and trade if he has his Toxin Blades or R ability up, but even with that buff up, he will still be at the losing end usually. At least he doesn't lose as badly compared to not having it up. After you realize you've run out of steam and cannot deal too much damage anymore, you should use your E to get out of the fight and wait for your cooldowns to be up and ready again before striking again. When trying to use your in-cap, you would usually want to in-cap an enemy only if you are confident your teammate will not pop it. This gives you the option to set up for large burst damage onto the in-cap target, or alternatively you can in-cap someone and go attack another target instead. As you may know, it is often tough to avoid damage as melee, and so you always have to weigh up the cost of jumping in to attack and all that. The playstyle of Croak is very flexible, so be flexible and unpredictable. Your energy can be spent on your ultimate, which does a huge burst of damage, but it can also be spent on in-caps, blinds, toxin blades and so on, so definitely try to quickly come up with a plan in your head before simply jumping into the backlines to apply pressure to avoid taking too much damage unnecessarily, or worse, be punished heavily for doing so. So yeah, that was Croak's playstyle in general. Now let's move on to Croak's Battlerite options and loadouts. Because there are so many Battlerites currently and it will take me a long while to go through and describe all of them one by one, I'll just display them here, and if you wish, you can go ahead and pause the video to slowly read through them before continuing the video. And so pause now to read through the first half, and now again for the second half. Okay, now that we've read all of them, let's continue. First, let's talk about his mouse 2 Battlerites, Lethal Toxins, Mending Toxins, and Spit. First off, Lethal Toxins does 4 damage and slows the enemy target by 12%, and so you usually want to pick up Lethal Toxins when you feel like the opposing team will not be targeting you, but your teammates instead. Next up, we have Mending Toxin, and it increases the healing that you get from your Toxin debuff from 8 to 16. You usually want to pick this Battlerite when your team does not have a healer, or you feel like you will be targeted a lot. This Battlerite increases Croak's survivability by quite a bit, as you will be casting your Spit whenever it is up and ready, and you're not in melee range. Lastly, Spit in some eyes is a gem, but there are also some that dislike it. Spit gives you 2 charges of your mouse 2 ability, but it also increases the cooldown by 1 second. If you are a player that usually holds your spits, then this Battlerite might be good for you. But personally, I usually do not pick up this Battlerite due to the fact that I just use my mouse tool whenever it is up to maximize my healing and my damage output. However, this is just my opinion on the Battlerite. Having spit allows you to spit at 2 or maybe even 3 different targets, and the toxin debuff does stack, meaning instead of getting only 8 total healing, you can actually possibly get 16 or 24 if you are able to land your mouse tools onto all the enemies. Next up, let us talk about Croak spacebar Battlerites, that is Jungle Toad and Triple Strike. For Jungle Toad, if you land your Frog Leap on the target, you will heal for 12 health, and so if you are able to land both of them, you can actually heal for a total of 24. This is a good Battlerite if you don't have a healer, but sometimes the first 12 HP that you heal might not take effect since you might be full HP and cannot heal beyond your current max health. Personally, I like this Battlerite a lot as it gives you 1v2 potential, since landing it on the orb also allows you to heal up. This Battlerite is bad against melee players since they are usually really close to you, meaning it will be hard for you to land your spacebars onto them and get healing out of it. Moving on, Triple Strike causes your next 3 mouse ones after jumping to deal extra 2 damage, and so this is a good Battlerite when paired up with lethal toxins if you feel like you will not be targeted throughout the match. I usually would not take this against melees at all, but it's better than taking Jungle Toad against other melees, as the extra 6 damage or 12 damage if you include your spacebar recast can come in handy. Next up, we'll talk a little bit about the camouflage Battlerites, Cut to the Chase, Time to Strike, Venom Strike, and Slippery Skin. Cut to the Chase increases the duration of your camouflage by 1 second, and honestly that 1 second helps out a lot since it usually lets you outlast your enemy's abilities. Plus it also gives you more time to move around to switch targets, and so this Battlerite is a must take for me usually. Time to Strike increases your fading haste factor from camouflage from 30% to 45% and haste duration from 1.5 seconds to 2 seconds. That means when you enter camouflage, it will give you a bigger burst of speed than you normally would get without the Battlerite, and so it is a pretty good Battlerite even though you would usually want the extra second in camouflage as compared to this. Venom Strike makes the next mouse one attack made while camouflage inflict a venom that explodes after 2 seconds that deal 8 damage. This venom is an area of effect attack, and so it is a decent Battlerite for dealing an extra 8 damage after you attack out of camouflage. That said though, this ability can be iframed, and so it's not 100% of the time that you are able to land it. Personally, I would not pick this Battlerite in 2s, but in 3s, there might be times when the AoE of the venom can damage their teammates, and so it might be more worth it there. In higher level plays, most players know how to keep a distance when they are inflicted by Venom Strike, and therefore it is not really useful at high levels. Overall though, it is still a decent Battlerite. Moving on, Slippery Skin is one of the new Battlerites Croak got from the recent patch, and what it does is it reduces damage taken by 30% for 2.5 seconds after camouflage ends. In a 1v1 situation, this Battlерite is not that good due to the fact that if you land your stun, the target is unable to move for 1 second anyway, so the effect of your Slippery Skin will effectively just last for 1.5 seconds. In 2s and 3s, it might be good since you are afraid that other enemies might inflict damage on you after you stun one of their teammates. Personally, a good Croak should be able to dish out damage quickly and get out of there before he gets hit too much, and so in my eyes, this Battlerite is not really that good, but it does have its potential. Moving on, let's go through the E-Battlerites, that is Noxious Reaction, Frog Slice, and Trickery. First off, Noxious Reaction lets your E root the targets for 1 second and reapply the Toxin debuff. This Battlerite is really good since you can E onto a target to root them, and then use your spacebar onto them for 20 damage, unless they iframe or counter it. You can also use it to peel for your teammate or use it to create space between you and the target since they will be rooted in place, and for all these reasons this is a very standard and reliable Battlerite to have since Croak usually lacks a bit in the peeling department. Frog Slice, also another new Battlerite that was added in the recent patch, increases your Noxious Lunge range by 30% and increases its damage by 4 as well. Personally, I really love this Battlerite due to the fact that it allows Croak to steal orbs and close gaps much more easily. Not only that, with Frog Slice, after you disengage with it, you also make it hard for enemies to chase you down because you have created a huge amount of distance as compared to your normal E ability. Because of the increased E range, which makes it more likely for you to hit more targets, Frog Slice can also be paired with Trickery, which is another Battlerite that we will get to soon, so that's another reason why this Battlerite could be pretty good in some matchups. There are some Croaks that dislike this Frog Slice Battlerite, so I'd say just try it out and see if you like it. On to Trickery. This Battlerite makes your Noxious Lunge hits reduce camouflage cooldown by 1.5 seconds per target hit, and this is why it goes pretty well with Frog Slice. This Trickery Battlerite is a Battlerite I usually take in 3s since there are more targets to hit in 3s compared to 2s. This is especially true against Blossom or Pestilus since they usually have their tree or queen down, and hitting them with your E ability can reduce the cooldown of your Q ability by 3 seconds quite easily if you hit 2 targets with it. The stationary tree or queen makes this a lot easier than hitting 2 moving targets with the E, and so that's why Trickery is good against these champions. This Battlerite is also decent against melees since you also have your Q up more often to stun or incap. Onto Frog Frenzy. This Battlerites improves your Toxin Blades so that it now increases the attack speed of your next 6 mouse 1 attacks, and the bonus damage applied to these attacks are also increased by 1. This is a really good Battlerites in my opinion because it can be used to reset after your mouse 1 attacks when it has 0 charges left, allowing you to keep dueling and putting out good damage. Activating Toxin Blades with the Frog Frenzy Battlerites allows you to get a huge amount of damage on targets without escapes if you are able to stick onto them. This is a Battlerites that is situational in 3s but usually taken in 2s. Lastly, Croak's ultimate Battlerites Momentum makes it so that Croak's movement speed is increased by 40% for 4 seconds after using Venom Wind. This Battlerites isn't too good since you're not always casting your ultimate and there are usually better options to spend your energy on, such as Deceit, Blind, and Toxin Blades. The movement speed is nice, but it takes too much energy and it's not always used, so this Battlerites is never taken. So yeah, those are my thoughts on most of the Battlerites for Croak. Like I mentioned in my beginner tips video, I think you'll want to at least give a bit of thought about what Battlerites you're using before each round, since that is a good way of understanding the champion more, and it'll help with making sure you learn what are the best situations to use which rights and so on. But in case you want to just quickly take a loadout and jump straight into a game, here are some loadouts that I use. To start off, here's the standard build I take most of the time for 2s. The reasons for taking these Battlerites have been mentioned in the earlier section, so I won't repeat it here, but when against melees, you may swap out Jungle Toad for Triple Strike or Trickery, since it is hard to land your spacebars onto melees. Or if you want more control appeal, you can also swap Frog Slice for Noxious Reaction, and the reason for taking Mending Toxin and Jungle Toad is so that you can always keep yourself alive in 2v2 as you might be focused down. The one flaw of Jungle Toad and Mending Toxin is that you might overheal, hence wasting the effect. In 3s, here's the standard build you could take. In 3s, Croak is usually not focused as much as in 2s, and so you do not need that much healing. You're more likely to have a healer in 3s as well, and so for these reasons, you can perhaps go with Lethal Toxin and Triple Strike to help take out the foe quicker. Feel free to swap Lethal Toxins and Triple Strike for Jungle Toad and Mending Toxin if you do not have a healer though. You can also swap out Cut to the Chase for Frog Frenzy against double or triple melees to help duo against them. And so yeah, that's about it on Croak's Battlerites and Loadouts. That was a fairly lengthy part, but we will now move on to champions that synergize with Croak before we finish the guide off with some final notes on Croak. On team compositions, I find that Croak synergizes well with range or support champions, especially characters such as Blossom, Jade, and Cirrus, slightly more so than melee champions. The reason for this is Croak is able to use his Incapacitate to set up for his ranged teammate, such as Jade for huge burst damage, and supports are also able to heal Croak whenever he takes in too much damage. Support and ranged champions can also benefit from the amount of space that Croak can create for them, since Croak's camouflage will usually keep enemies zoned away from Croak's teammates, and so that's why he's naturally pretty good with other ranged teammates. Melee champions could work well with Croak too, but it's not as good compared to supports, since Croak cannot play aggressively because he will need to use his spit to heal up. That said though, even if Croak doesn't have a support teammate, he can still sustain himself quite well with his spits, so not having a healer is still fine most of the time. And so yeah, to summarize, Croak is a highly mobile champion who is able to jump in, deal some good damage and then get out. He's a lot of fun to play and learn, but it'll take some practice to fully master all of the little intricacies to playing Croak effectively, since the enemies might just collapse onto Croak when he is too aggressive. Even with 3 mobility tools and 4 if you add in your camouflage, you still have to play Croak relatively safely and practice your mechanics and ability to play mind games, since it is quite easy to make costly mistakes otherwise. Master all of these though and you'll feel like a real assassin that is Croak. And so yeah, that's about it for my Croak guide. I hope you guys found it useful. As you all may know, Ulrich is coming out soon, and so the next guide I'll be doing would be on Ulrich. Unfortunately, I might be away for some time shortly after Ulrich is out, so take note that this next guide will probably take quite a while. From the votes on my Jamila guide last week, the next Battlerite Champion Guides I'll be updating after this would be on Varesh and Rukan, and so hopefully you guys can look forward to the next 3 guides on Ulrich, Varesh, and then Rukan. That's about it for this video everybody, and I hope you enjoyed watching this video as well. If you did, please subscribe to the channel, leave a like, leave any questions or thoughts in the comment section below, share this video with your friends, and you can check out my other videos too if you haven't already. I stream 3 days a week on Twitch nowadays as well, so do check me out at twitch.tv/Chyill as well if you are into watching people play Battlerite live. Thank you very much for watching my video, and until next time guys, have a great day, keep gaming, stay chill, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.